This is John Karp from the 48 Laws of Power podcast. My debut album is now available on all major streaming platforms and can be downloaded on iTunes and Amazon.com. Go to johncarp.com for more details. That's JONCARP.com. Thank you.
Don't forget about me.
What's going on, everybody? You tune into the 48 Laws of Power podcast. My name's Rudy Malumba.
And I'm John Karp.
Let's get right into this book. This episode, we're going to do Laws 29 and 30. Law 29 is, plan all the way to the end. The judgment is, the ending is everything. Plan all the way to it, taking into account all the possible consequences, obstacles, and twists of fortune that might reverse your hard work and give the glory to others. By planning to the end, you will not be overwhelmed by circumstances, and you will know when to stop. Gently guide fortune and help determine the future by thinking ahead.
All right, cool. One of the aspects I noticed when reading these particular laws was there's one principle that stuck out, and that was improvising will only take you so far. Mm-hmm. And the transgression that Robert Greene gives in the book best illustrates that, and this was about this guy called Vasco Nunez de Balboa, who was
related to Rocky.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing when I was reading this too. Anyway, he was like some noble Spaniard guy who had fallen into debt, and he was running from his creditors, and so he was a stowaway on the ship. And when the captain found him on the ship, he was gonna dump him off at the next island because they were on their way to relieve this colony. But the captain of the ship soon got word that that colony was abandoned, and Balboa had kind of ingratiated himself to the crew and was able to convince the crew to actually head to what is now Panama, and because he was saying, oh, there's gold there, and which he actually did believe. And
does Columbus set up like some rumor or something?
There's all kinds of stories about who started that rumor. But basically Balboa convinced the crew to do this, and then the crew convinced the captain. The captain was like, all right, let's do it. So they landed on Panama, and the captain immediately wanted to start a colony and be the governor there. But Balboa convinced the crew to make him the captain the governor instead of the captain. Yeah. And so the crew voted for Balboa, and the captain was like, well, okay, the hell with this, and I guess he went back to Spain. Yeah. And anyway, so Balboa had a pretty good deal. He went from being a guy running from his debt to now being a governor of this random, colony in Panama. But the problem was Balboa knew that when the captain reached Spain, that they were going to come and arrest him because he was running from debt, and he had a lot of criminal charges in addition to that. So Balboa got the idea that basically, well, if I claim something for Spain, then they're not going to be so keen on arresting me. So he marched his men across Panama because I guess he heard that there was an ocean nearby from a new ocean nearby from some of the natives. Yeah. And sure enough, of course, on the other side of Panama is the Pacific Ocean. And he was like, oh, yeah, I'll claim this for Spain. And it was about this time that this other guy came by, and his name was, I can't remember his name. Or was it? He's got some crazy name.
Pizarro, I think. Right?
Yeah, that's
Francisco Pizarro.
Pizarro. That's it. Yeah, Francisco Pizarro. That's the one. Anyway, so he came by, and he had initially, initially had orders to arrest Balboa, but because of Balboa's recent discovery, he was like, "Oh, okay, well, whatever."
You're cool.
Yeah. And but Pizarro then learned that Balboa had learned about this from the natives on the Pacific side of Panama about this supposed city of gold.
El Dorado.
What we now know as El Dorado, which was further down south where the Incas were. And so Francisco Pizarro was like, "All right, Balboa, go check it out," So Balboa took some men over, but this time on their crossing, most of his men died, and so they had to turn back. And at this point, actually, Pizarro was the guy who turned. My mistake. Pizarro was the guy that turned Balboa over. It was actually this other guy called Pedarius.
Oh, okay.
So Pedarius was the guy that came to arrest Balboa initially, but when Balboa came back, he ran into Pizarro, who was a friend of his initially, and Pizarro then had him arrested and turned over to Pedarius, and then Balboa was executed, and Pedarius ended up becoming the new governor of this colony and set up expeditions to go into eventually the Incas. And it's a really convoluted story, but essentially the idea here is that Balboa, he was always like kind of trying to catch up to the next thing that came in his way, right? So he was trying to escape his creditors, so he just stowed away on the ship. Then the captain was trying to throw him overboard, so then he started telling the story about there being gold. And then he wanted to be the governor, and so then he had to convince the crew to get rid of the captain somehow. And then he knew that the Spaniards were going to come after him, so he had to. Everything he did was in response to him trying to not, basically go to prison. Yeah.
He was responding to kind of the immediate pressures of the moment. Really. He didn't really. The important thing is he had a goal in mind, but he didn't plan that goal. You know what I mean? So I guess the main thing about this goal, about planning all the way at the end, that Green stresses is you have a goal in mind and you take into account any and all possibilities. You make sure you're ready for them, whether they be good or bad, so you're prepared for that. So, this is kind of a cautionary tale of someone who dealt with pressures that were on him and had to make a way out of it, but instead of being focused on the goal, he was more focused on, okay, so the creditors are after me, so let me get out of here first, and now that I'm out of here, these people are trying to kill me, so let me do this, let me do that. He might have not been in those situations if he had a plan all along. Then he would have known, I'm out here looking for gold, so maybe I'm not going to be 100% open about certain things, or I'm going to kind of elude these people because, he ended up stirring up a lot of enemies in a way, people who were like, okay, this person's telling me everything that he's trying to do, so I'm going to learn everything I need to learn, and then I'll just do away with him, and I'll find the treasure myself, etc. So I think that the reason why this is a transgression is because he was is because of those reasons. He didn't plan all the way to the end. He didn't take into account situations that could, foil his plan. And, in a way, he kind of took shortcuts, I guess. He was responding to a lot of, he was responding to the pressures of the moment. So that's mostly it.
Yeah. Which I think is an important point. Sometimes you have to improvise. You're in a situation where, you didn't, either you didn't plan for it or you could not possibly plan for it, and you have to improvise some kind of solution. But generally, whatever you're trying to accomplish, you need to have a plan of action in order to actually see it through, so that you're not having to constantly, put out one fire and then put out another fire. It's I'm gonna be picking on my football team, the Miami Dolphins, right now. Every week it's like they're putting out a new fire.
Yeah.
1 week it's a couple weeks 2 weeks ago, the offensive line was mostly like out for injury.
Mm-hmm.
So Tannehill had to adjust his game, but then because the offensive line wasn't there to defend him, he got injured, and so they've had to use his backup at quarterback, Brock Osweiler, who isn't.
I know him. He played for Notre Dame or something.
Yeah, and I think he's played in the NFL for other teams as well.
The Bears.
Did he play for the Bears?
I remember. Yeah, I remember him playing for the Bears.
Okay.
Ago.
I think he's played against the Bears too. Yeah. But in any case,
journeyman.
Something like he's one of those. But so he's having to basically fill in for Tannehill, even though he's really not that great of a quarterback, truthfully speaking.
Yeah.
But through a series of like very bizarre plays, the Dolphins were able to beat the Bears, but it's finally caught up to them, with their whittled down roster.
100%.
They never formed a plan B, and now they're just losing game after game.
Yeah. What's their record right now?
It's 4-4.
Oh, okay. 500.
But they started off as 3-0 at the beginning of the season.
Okay, yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
And now, in fact, I kind of bragged about that a couple episodes ago.
Yeah, you were. That was really funny.
And now here we are.
I think you were bragging about like all Florida teams.
Yeah, and now they're all doing crap. Actually, you know what? Even Jacksonville, because like Jacksonville's bread and butter was their defense.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was their defense that was able to bring Blake Bortles as far as as into the playoffs. Because Blake Bortles really isn't that great of a quarterback, but he can use his legs at least. And with a good defense, you can kind of make up for a poor offense, right?
Manage the game a little bit.
Yeah, but when your defense starts to falter, and that's your only strong point, and you didn't during the offseason, and you didn't take the time to get a different quarterback or at least beef up your offense, then no wonder why Jacksonville's been having a losing streak. I think I want to say now they've had a 4-game losing streak.
Yeah. That's not looking good for these Florida teams, John.
Well, it is what it is, man.
But yeah, I mean, it ties back to the way I look at this law is I look at this essentially as the kind of law of patience, right? And the law of kind of subjugating present conditions for a better future condition, right? Which is really difficult to do. He talked about in here that that men tend to react more with their heart than their head. That's just something that I think we naturally kind of have to. Yeah, most men are ruled by the heart, not the head. I feel like that's just something that naturally human beings just have to kind of fight against. There's always that constant struggle, right? So, I mean, if you're, when present kind of pressures or pleasures come in, it tends to interrupt kind of your long-term goals and stuff. So if you react more to them, then it affects, it affects your plans, or when you haven't accounted for them, it affects your plans later.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So in that case, it's kind of, this law is a little bit too about controlling your, controlling yourself in a way where you control your emotions in a way where you just know, like, I might have to respond to this thing now, or I might have to, or I'm tempted into doing this thing now, but for the sake of this future that I've planned for, I'm not going to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, just as an example, I used to do improv comedy in college, and you think, well, in the name of itself, you're improvising. You're kind of contradicting what you just said, John.
Yeah. About
how improvising isn't really that great.
Yeah.
I apologize for burping into the mic. Anyway, so
shout out to Coke.
Yeah,
Coca-Cola.
Thanks a lot, Coca-Cola. But anyway, so, but the fact matter is yeah, improv comedy is just that it's improvisation.
You have to be in the moment.
You do. However, you're still running like our whole show was like improv games. So it was like whose line is it anyway?
Yeah.
That kind of thing, We still ran through every week we ran through those games.
Yeah.
All the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certain principles, like for example, like if Rudy says we start off a scene and Rudy goes, "Hey, that's a really big squirrel you have in your pocket." I can't just go, "No, there's no squirrel in my pocket," because I just stepped on Rudy's toes,
Exactly.
right? Because he was going to go somewhere with it.
Yeah. Yes, and.
Yeah, exactly. The yes and principle is what they call it. Exactly. So it is improvised. Most of it is improvised, but there is a format.
There's a bigger picture there.
There's a much bigger picture, and you wouldn't know that as an audience member, but you would as a member of an improv group, because you know that, okay, this particular game, it's really important for me to be as physically ridiculous as possible for whatever this particular game is about. Or for this one, it's more of a wordplay, or it's that sort of thing. And also, you got to keep in mind, like, I kind of have an idea of where this person's going to go, because I've rehearsed with this person however many times, and I know they generally tend to follow these same beats. So what can I do to kind of complement that or turn it on its head, whichever you want to do?
Yeah.
So yes, there is improvisation going on, but there's also a structure. It's the same thing with jazz, actually.
Absolutely.
There is an underlying structure, and they are playing in key, unless it's like complete freeform jazz and they're just doing whatever.
It sounds really odd.
Which does not very pleasing for a lot of people. I appreciate it because I think it's interesting, but most people do not appreciate it.
Yeah.
So point is that for all these things, even if it seems like it's coming out of the blue, there's actually an underlying structure. It's more of a loose structure, I guess you could say.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. The reason I like this law so much, though, is I think it just points to patience as a virtue, right? It just points to it's the one of the good reasons to plan until the end, which means not just having a plan, because I think having a plan is vital, but also having a plan for that, having kind of like a roadmap to that plan is, I think in any situation, it can kind of ground you. You know what I mean? Like I've, specifically for me growing up, kind of like as a young kid, I remember when I was still like in middle school and high school and stuff, I didn't necessarily think that critically about like my future and where I wanted to go and stuff like that, and my goals and things like that. So, for me, like waking up and going to school was something where I was there was no rhyme or reason to anything that I was doing. Now kind of as an adult, kind of with a career and things like that and goals that I have in mind, when I wake up in the morning, I can kind of center myself and go, okay, why am I doing this? The answer of why. Then you can kind of go, okay, I have this plan that I've set into motion. So the things that maybe I might struggle with are the things that I don't really find enjoyable now. They kind of there's a reason why I'm doing it now, because I'm trying to get to this bigger goal here. So I feel like this is one of my favorite laws so far, just because it points to just how virtue and how patience is kind of a virtue, and it's something that when you have like a bigger picture, like a bigger goal that you have in your head, all these little pressures or even these little things that may distract you are kind of, it makes that worth dealing with. I had another comparison too, like I think this law specifically ties in very well to the 7 Habits, Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey. He talks one of the second habit is to begin with the end in mind, and that book talks a lot. It's all about kind of thinking about not just necessarily your legacy, but the example that he has in that book is picture yourself at the end, at your funeral, and imagine what you want people to say about you. And so by doing that exercise, what you're doing is you're trying to figure out the entire why of your life. You're trying to figure out what your motivations are and what, the things that really give your life meaning. And so and then when you craft that out, essentially the book recommends you to come up with some sort of personal mission statement based on what you want people to say about you when you're gone. And I feel like that's the ultimate plan all the way to the end, because you're thinking super macro scale about your own life. And by doing that, I mean, when you know why you want to do certain things, it makes your everydays that much more meaningful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like that second habit and this law, there's that connection there, and just shows you how patience is, one of the highest virtues, I think, in life. So.
And that's a really good point about kind of imagining what you want people to say at your funeral.
Yeah,
it's a really common trick. I've used it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, like,
if you get distracted with things, like if you're just if you're improvising every day, just on a basic level, and you're just doing things to put out fires today, and you're just doing that every day, I mean, you're at the end of your life, you're not necessarily going to be someone. I don't know, like, you're just going to be someone that reacts to stuff. You're not going to be a proactive person. Really.
But exactly, you want to be proactive, not reactive. I wish I knew that when I was younger too, but here we are. So, like, this particular law, he also gave an observance, and I think this observance really kind of boils everything that we've been talking about down to, like, a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when he was talking about Bismarck, and we've talked about Bismarck before. But as a quick recap, Bismarck was basically chancellor in Prussia, which was a German state of a much bigger German confederacy at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, one of the members was.
It wasn't just like a different Russia.
No.
Okay.
I
made that mistake in world history class when I was.
A lot of people do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, because Prussia, Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a common mistake.
I thought it was like a Russian word for Russia.
I was like,
they go crazy with peas out there. Do
Do they?
I don't know.
Okay.
Russian stereotypes. We'll be right back.
That was almost a tangent. But anyway, one of the members of this German confederacy was Austria, and they were considered the power house of this confederacy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bismarck didn't like that, and he wanted a couple things. One, he wanted a unified Germany, and he wanted Prussia to be the head of this unified Germany, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he laid out a series of steps for him to do that. So the first thing he did was he started a war with Denmark, which kind of seems counterintuitive, but the reason why he did it was because he wanted to. Well, the whole war was about acquiring these lands known as Schleswig and Holstein.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and he actually got Austria to help,
Mm-hmm.
and saying that, hey, if you help us out, we'll let you have these lands.
Mm-hmm.
And Austria was like, hey, great idea, let's do that. And so, together Prussia and Austria and some other German states were able to defeat Denmark. But when the war ended, Prussia was like, let's renegotiate this whole deal. We really want these two lands. And Austria was like, no, but okay, fine. Austria's like, how about this? We'll let you have Schleswig, but we're going to keep Holstein.
Mm-hmm.
And Prussia's like, all right, fine, whatever. So Prussia got Schleswig, but eventually Austria, actually about a year later, Austria sold Holstein to Prussia anyway. So Bismarck got what he wanted anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason for the war was to take these formerly Prussian lands, right, that were in Denmark's hands. But really, Bismarck's whole point was to kind of unite the people of Prussia, give them a sense of nationalism.
Absolutely.
Like, we're doing this for Prussia. And,
Absolutely.
so kind of got everyone together and ready to, kick butt,
Yeah.
So that was the first thing, was unite the people, right? So the second thing was, all right, let's withdraw from the German Federation now that we've got the backing of the people. And this was not popular with the king, but he managed, Bismarck, managed to convince the king that they should do this.
Okay.
Much to the chagrin of the king's wife and the prince and the other German princes as well. But Prussia went forth with it and defeated Austria in what's now known as the 7 Weeks' War. But
how long did that take?
12 years.
Okay, yeah. Nice little misnomer.
No, it's 7 weeks. I know there are some wars though that were called like the 100 Years' War, and it was really like 109 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And there's actually 200 Years' Wars.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Bizarre.
That's some world history stuff.
Yeah.
Lord. Yeah.
But anyway, but when the Prussians defeated Austria, even though the king and the generals really wanted to like take more land from Austria, Bismarck convinced them otherwise, and they ended up signing a peace deal with Austria, which basically turned all the other German states, they call it liberated the German states, but really just turned the control of the German states over to away from Austria. Okay. So effectively, it created a separate German confederation that excluded Austria. So, and that's the beginnings of the Austria country and the German country, basically.
Yeah.
That's why you have two countries right next to each other that speak German.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
Good Lord.
So now this new German confederacy was called the North German Confederation because it was north of Austria, right? And Bismarck was like, all right, cool. So now that we got this whole North German Confederation going, the next thing I really would like to see is this confederacy just be united as one country, with Prussia, with the center of government being in Prussia, right? So how did he do this? Well, he did what Germans have done time and time again: go to war with France. And the two countries went to war, and in the course of the war, this again basically gave the idea was to basically give the Germans like a sense of nationalism that spread not just in Prussia but around this new German
by having a common
state,
enemy.
yeah, which was France. And of course, the Germans won, and Bismarck basically achieved the goal that he wanted. And now, despite the king and the other German generals wanting to expand the borders of Germany and even taking part of get into this whole colonizing game that all the other European states were getting into, Bismarck convinced them otherwise, and Germans still did some colonizing, but not nearly as much as they would have had Bismarck not been there.
Absolutely.
And the reason why Bismarck was very keen on just kind of now all of a sudden playing peacemaker in Europe was because he had realized that he'd reached his goal, and to really try to expand upon that would be foolish and would probably make everything that he worked so hard to achieve unravel.
Yeah.
So that's another lesson, is that when you do achieve your goal, you don't really want to try to expand too far from that goal.
Yeah.
And that's kind of getting into a law that we'll get to on actually the very last episode.
Law 47.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aiming, not going past your mark.
Yeah.
In victory.
Exactly.
And I feel like the reason not to do that is because you need to have kind of some rhyme and reason with the goal that you're setting. I feel like when you get victory or like winning at something is it makes really kind of makes you feel good. And so by doing that, you're kind of responding to your ego in a way by saying, oh, I was able to achieve victory here, here, and here. Let me go for more. And the more you try to, the more, I guess, greedy you are, and the more you try to get more and just kind of appease your ego, you tend to open yourself out to failure a lot more. Unless, of course, you really diligently plan all the way to the end, and you take into account everything that could go wrong with it. But I guess that last part here, I mean, it's kind of checking your ego. It's kind of, it's important once you've achieved victory to kind of go like, okay, if I do want more, why do I want that? And is it worth it? And in Bismarck's case, I mean, he achieved everything he needed. He didn't really have to achieve more because, I mean, what's the point? I mean,
Right.
And I feel like it's kind of it's kind of the same in real life too. I mean, when you set a goal, you achieve it, and you're kind of on the win streak. Why ruin the win streak? Especially if this is something you've wanted for a long time. So.
Well, or even if you do want to expand upon your success, do it in a measured way.
Yeah.
Don't just get consumed by greed, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Be diligent about when the next step in your process, I guess.
Definitely.
If you want to go beyond just the goal you reached.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely. I mean, with the discussion of this law, though, I think there's definitely. I talk a lot about the themes that pop up in this book, and definitely something as broad as controlling your emotions is something that comes up, I think, for the majority of these laws. But it is true. I mean, like I was saying before about how you kind of have to subjugate today's pressures or today's pleasures for tomorrow's goals. I think that's definitely the main takeaway I got from this, about how you really have to look at things kind of big picture wise. I feel like the experiential you goes through a lot of things, and if you're always responding to things that are happening in the moment, and never really considering the big picture impacts of that, you're doing yourself a disservice. So that's definitely the main takeaway for this one for me.
Absolutely. Well, shall we do the reversal?
Reversal time. The main thing Green talked about in the reversal is, first of all, in general, he essentially said there's no real reversal to, there's no real purpose in contemplating a reversal to this law, just because, I mean, what reversal do you really have to, planning all the way to the end? I mean, it's something that if you don't, then you'll just live every moment day by day. You won't really, I think you'll lose proportion of things that are going on, and it kind of does you a disservice. But he did kind of mention about how sometimes people get very rigid about their plan, and they don't take into account things that happen on the day-to-day. So when that happens, that could easily kind of skew you away from the plan. So it's good to kind of have built-in responses to things that could go wrong on the way to you achieving that goal. But essentially, there's no real reversal to planning all the way to the end. It's something that's very important to do.
Well, I think he was saying too, like, be open to having alternative paths to either reaching your goal or basically having a similar result to your goal. So, like, for example, like, let's say, you really want to have a wife and kids and all that, and, you find the lady of your dreams, but surprise, surprise, she can't bear children. Well, I don't know. Why don't you adopt or get some dogs?
Yeah.
Or in a more goal-oriented way, let's say, you really aspire to be a musician, right? But your songwriting's not that great, but you're really good at recording arts and audio engineering. Well, maybe you can record other musicians. So it's,
true.
You can find alternatives that maybe don't take you to your exact goal, but gets you close enough,
Definitely.
And also too, even just taking paths to reach your goal, the original plan that you had, you're going to have to change it from time to time and go in directions you didn't think you were going to need to go into in order to see your goal take fruition, right? Whether that means having to move somewhere for more opportunity, or what have you, or just kind of taking this step towards your career in terms of, in order for me to be, a broadcast engineer, it's not enough that I, know how to run a board. I also need to, be able to be on air, but I'm, really terrified about speaking to a microphone. So maybe I should take some like speech classes or something.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that, like stuff you need to consider. And
Absolutely.
you'll only do that really when you start pursuing your goal. But even with all those alternatives that will come up, you still have to have like a goal and a plan to get there.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise you're just chasing one alternative to the other and you're just running in circles.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's what happens a lot for people in their 20s. They're just so desperate to make a living that they jump from job to job to job. And
Definitely.
whereas if they just picked like a career and stuck with it through thick or thin, that would play out for them much better in the long run.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think another example of that too is people who in your 20s, let's say you went to college and stuff, and let's say you actually were in a something that was like a career that you were studying to be in, a career that makes decent money and stuff, and then when you get out, instead of trying to build up the skills, or instead of you picking jobs that will kind of make you better at your career, or more challenging jobs where you can pick up different skills, you just go for the money. You just go, what job will make me the most money? You just chase after that. I think that ends up catching up with you too, because you kind of lose sight of the big picture. If your goal was to be this, this big architect, but you chose jobs just for the money, who knows? You're putting yourself in, you're kind of putting yourself in the box, and you're not learning the things you should have learned. You're not really challenging yourself. I feel like that could also be kind of a situation that people tend to get in their 20s and maybe when they're younger.
Yeah.
So, well, I think we did law number 29. Let's switch gears to law number 30. Law number 30 is make your accomplishments seem effortless. The judgment is your actions must seem natural and executed with ease. All the toil and practice that go into them, and also all the clever tricks, must be concealed. When you act effortlessly, as if you could do much more. Avoid the temptation of revealing how hard you work. It only raises questions. Teach no one your tricks, or they will be used against you.
All right, cool. Well, I'd like to start this off with a quote by Seneca, which is
Seneca the Younger.
Yeah, that's the one.
Oh yeah,
that's our Stoic boy.
Absolutely.
And the quote is, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." Right.
Oh yeah.
So when people keep saying that, "Oh, you're so lucky," well, maybe I might be saying something controversial, but there really is no such thing as luck. It's just, are you prepared?
I think I believe you. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you prepared? And when the opportunity comes, will you be ready?
Absolutely. Look at someone like Tom Brady.
Right.
He got picked pretty deep in the draft and everything, and he was at the right place at the right time. But he got lucky, some people would say. Granted, the quarterback in front of him got hurt, but if he couldn't produce, right, and if he hadn't put in all those years of practice and hard work, and he went out there, he would have flopped, and boom, he wouldn't have won all those Super Bowls.
Exactly.
Same kind of thing.
Yeah. And it kind of follows the theme of, there's a couple different things you can take from this, and both observances kind of address both of these. So we'll go through them both. And the first, kind of takeaway is kind of what we were just talking about. Seemingly effortless skill comes with practice. So, the great magician Houdini was known for like basically being able to escape out of all these like really bizarre circumstances, you know, like hanging upside down while in a straitjacket or in a tank of water or something like that. And really, truthfully speaking, what was great about Houdini was that he, he practiced all these skills all the time.
Yeah.
You know, he read books on locks and how they worked. He learned from some old Japanese guy this trick about swallowing objects and holding them in your esophagus and then regurgitating them at will, which is a very common magic trick, or trick, actually. And nobody really knows for sure how Houdini did a majority of his tricks, but it's speculated that he actually hid the tools to help him escape locks in his esophagus, because it was the one place that the people who were locking him up couldn't look. Because what are you gonna do? Shove your finger down someone's esophagus? I mean, come on, it's not gonna happen. No. But by far, of all of Houdini's stories that Robert Greene talked about, I think the best one was when this German guy, he kind of called Houdini out on his tricks and everything. And even said that he had, beaten Houdini before in a handcuff contest, meaning like, you put handcuffs on someone and that person tries to escape from the handcuffs, right? Yeah. And which of course wasn't true. And so Houdini was like, all right, fine, I'm going to challenge you. Yeah. And so now this German guy, his name was Klopini, he somehow he found out the code to one of Houdini's favored handcuffs, and it was a code that was spelled out in letters. And these handcuffs were like French handcuffs, and they spelled out clefs, CLEFS, which is French for keys.
And clay. That's how they pronounce it, which is weird because the F is silent.
Oh, that's right. How do they pronounce it?
Clay.
Clay?
Yeah.
It's a French man. I'm telling. Hey, you know what? I made that disclaimer when we started this whole shindig that I don't know a lick of French.
It's a bizarre pronunciation. I don't know why the F is silent sometimes, but
how it is. Whatever. Well, that's why Rudy's here, because they speak. Because you're from the
Congo.
Yeah, the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Speak French there.
Yeah. Okay. In case anyone was wondering.
Oh, yeah.
Why Rudy knows
French.
No,
I'm just a genius. I know all languages.
Sure. Okay.
Make it seem effortless.
Like, why does Rudy know French? Because Rudy has a distinct advantage over me. That's why. Anyway, so the word spelled out Clay. Mm-hmm. Is that how you say it?
Clay, yeah.
Clay, and which is spelled CLEFS. Mm. And anyway, Klopini had figured this out about Houdini's handcuffs, and so he was like, "All right, I'm going to totally use this against Houdini." Mm. And Houdini, the night of the handcuff competition, Houdini had laid out various handcuffs that Klopini could choose from, and Klopini obviously chose the French handcuffs, right? So Houdini and actually Klopini was able to take the handcuffs beforehand and make sure that they even opened with that word clay, right? And
they would practice.
Yeah, exactly. And then sure enough, they worked.
Yeah.
And so he was like, "Oh, I totally got Houdini now," right? So, anyway, so Houdini went to go put the handcuffs on Klopini, but then Houdini just started like throwing a tantrum just randomly, and started calling Klopini a fraud, and this like weird little tantrum escalated into like they were like wrestling with each other, like two grown men wrestling with each other on stage, and people are like in the audience like, what's going on, right? And anyway, after they tussled for a little bit, Houdini was like, all right, fine, I'll put the handcuffs on you. And so he did. And Klopini went to change the combination over to CLEFS, but the handcuffs didn't open, and he was like, "What the hell's going on?" So he was trying to get these handcuffs off, couldn't get them off, and eventually he gave up. And Houdini went over and turned the combination over to spell fraud, FRAUD, and handcuffs opened. So, and Clopini never figured out how Houdini did that.
No, he did it. Yeah.
But what had happened was Houdini had planned. Somehow he knew that Clopini knew about these French handcuffs. I would not be surprised if he on purposely either told Clopini's spy or whatever, or maybe even hired this guy as a double agent or whatever.
Wow.
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say how it exactly went down, but somehow or another he knew that Clopini knew the original combination to the handcuffs.
That's Law 14 stuff, by the way. Pose as a friend, work as a spy.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And so he knew that Clopini knew the combination to the handcuffs. So he practiced this fake tussling.
Yeah.
Until he could change until he could change the combination during the course of that tussling. Yeah. So that when he actually, threw this fake tantrum with Clopini and turned into a full-on wrestle match, he was, when that was all going on, neither Clopini or the audience realized that whole time Houdini was changing the combination.
That's brilliant, dude.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's all from just practice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he was able to kind of get Clopini and the audience distracted long enough for him to do all that while he was doing all that to actually change the lock to fraud. Yeah, making it impossible for Clopini to get out of it. And actually, it's interesting because that fake tussle could kind of be seen as a Law 17, cultivate an air of unpredictability. Yeah, because Bobby Fischer kind of did the same thing right before their chess match and everything like that. One of the main things I got from this observer specifically in this law is Green talks a lot about the work, the amount of work behind Houdini's actions. On the surface you saw Houdini's, all the stunts he would do, being underwater, getting out of locks and all that stuff. And John, you mentioned it earlier about how he spent a lot of times kind of just poring over books about how to get out of locks and things like that, and practicing all these really physically demanding things on his body and learning how to swallow. I think they're saying like a peeled potato skins and stuff. Yeah, swallow it and bringing it back up, and kind of just making your esophageal muscles stronger, things like that. But there was a really intense level of work to get to that point in order for you to make really getting up to like a mastery level at a certain task. And then when you're at that point that you've practiced something over and over for so long, you've reached like a 10,000 hours kind of thing. When you do that thing in front of people, it looks easy. I feel like that a testament to that is, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you're watching someone do something masterfully. I mean, like athletes, specifically for me, when I watch someone like Usain Bolt, run or whatever, I mean, he makes it look so like he's smiling while he's running. He's like having a fun time while he's doing it. It kind of makes you think like, man, I could do that. But then when you actually go and try to replicate it, it's extremely difficult.
Yeah, you think like all you have to do is run around your neighborhood. Yeah. Like for a week and you'll be good. But then the first day you take that mile long circle and you get back to your house and you feel like you're gonna die.
Yeah, man. You're like, what? People do this? But yeah, I mean, and you see him doing that, but I mean, you don't see the blood, sweat, and tears it took to get to that point, and that's something that could have taken 10 to 15 years just to get up to that level. But I think it's kind of a testament of that, and again, with power, it's all about appearances. So if you can, you can make something look easy, then people perceive it to be easy. they perceive you to have superhuman powers because regular people can't do that. So if you can do it with that amount of ease, then obviously you're like a god or something. I also think there's kind of a parallel too with this law and a couple other laws, but specifically, I think it all stems from laws 3 and 4, about how there's kind of a compound effect with both those laws here, where laws 3 and 4, law 4 specifically talked more about things you say. Don't say too much, because the more you reveal and the more you say, kind of the more power. Because really, people say foolish things. So if you can limit the amount of foolish things you say, then by comparison, you look more wise. You know what I mean? You look better than everybody else. So and that's kind of something that we as humans have to deal with. We love to reveal things about ourselves. We love to talk about ourselves and things like that. So I feel like with this, it's more law 4 related to a skill, but it's more like you've achieved kind of a mastery level at a certain skill, but don't reveal anything about that to people. Don't reveal how hard it was. Don't reveal things like that, because then you're not gonna appear as great as you appeared to them before. Right?
Well, that kind of leads into the second observance, actually. And kind of the takeaway from the second observance is, if you try too hard to impress someone, it generally has the opposite effect. You want to try to appear as natural as possible. This is particularly good if you're trying to impress or ingratiate others, right? Trying to get people to like you.
Yeah.
If you're trying to entertain, obviously, if you're a guitar player and you're, if you could just sit there and if you practice at, your guitar long enough, you can kind of just look like you are doing practically nothing, but you're playing this amazing thing, right? But if you're sitting there and you're like, it's like every other note, it's the wrong note. People are gonna go, okay, and they're gonna walk out. And then of course dating, because we've all either been or have known someone who was trying to impress someone that they liked and was just tripping on their own words, or
I've been that guy.
Yeah, or just acting like a complete idiot. And then that person sees that and they're like, wow, this person's really pathetic. And then they go somewhere else.
It's an immediate turn off.
Yeah, exactly. And the observance that covers this, Robert Greene mentioned a lot of stories about this guy called Senno Rikuyu, I guess is how you say his name, who is a master of this particular type of Japanese tea ceremony known as Cha no Yu. If I mispronounce that, surprise, surprise, I don't speak Japanese either. But anyway, so Robert Greene told a lot of stories about this tea master, but the one that really kind of stuck out to me in regards to this particular interpretation of the law was when he was having tea with a friend of his, and his friend got up from where they were sitting just kind of randomly without saying anything, walked outside and cut a lemon from a tree, and then came back inside and went to use it as a garnish on a dish. And initially Rikuyu saw this and he was like, oh, that's really interesting that he just needed a garnish, and he was like, oh, I'll go outside and get a lemon. And he was like, that's really cool, and this guy's like really spontaneous and clever. But then this friend of his then offered this lemon as part of like some Osaka rice cake or whatever. And the way I guess he went about doing that, it made it clear to Rikuyu that in actuality this whole supposedly spontaneous, let me get up from the table and walk outside and cut a lemon from a tree, was planned the whole way. And for Rikuyu, it took that action and made it lose its intrigue. Right? Because initially Rikuyu thought, oh, this is really spontaneous and interesting. But then he saw that it was planned, and it just wasn't the same once he realized that it was a planned action.
Definitely.
Kind of like what I was talking about earlier. the when I was talking about the improv stuff, the audience doesn't realize that in truth and actuality, the improvisers, while the exact situations that they're performing around these games are improvised, the skill set behind it is not. But as an audience member, you don't see that. You just see these guys, you see these people making up random little skits in front of you, and you're like, oh, this is amazing. How can they come up with stuff this quickly?
These guys are brilliant.
And make it this funny.
Absolutely.
But they don't see the inner mechanisms of what it takes to acquire that skill, which is what it is.
Yeah. Definitely.
And if they were to see that, it wouldn't be as impressive. Exactly.
Yeah. I definitely, I think with this observance, one thing that comes to mind is, while something like appearances, I feel like we're on law 30 now. We're like near 60%, and the majority of these laws have kind of shown that power really is almost all about appearances, how things look, and so if you can make something look effortless, obviously something great look effortless, obviously people will revere you and things like that. I feel like the antithesis of that is you trying to get people's attention, or you trying too hard to get people to think a certain way, right? And because people react to that really badly, and it takes away from whatever power you might have gained, right? So like when we go back to even law 3, and the example is Ninon de L'Enclos, and she's trying to teach the guy about all that stuff, and then he reveals everything, and she sees how all that was kind of a desperate attempt to
she was teaching
was it Avignon, or it was he was like
some
prince,
what
or
was
something.
his name, some French guy.
But yeah, like he was trying to woo this girl, and he went through all of that, and then when he revealed to her, and she liked him because she
it was the Marquis de Sévigné.
There you go.
He was trying to impress some countess. And
and at the end, so I guess the way the story goes, he was trying to woo her, and Ninon de L'Enclos was a prostitute who was really, she knew the affairs of love and stuff, so she was trying to teach him how to court her, and so he would do things that that would kind of that intrigued her, you know what I mean? So he was doing things out of character, and it became a nice little game to her, and she and by kind of concealing his intentions and doing things spontaneously like that, it made her like him. It intrigued her. And then at the end of all that, he told her, once she was like at her height of like, oh, I'm in love with this guy, I guess, he told her that he loves her. And I guess he revealed the lengths he went while he was courting her, and all that magic went away.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that's kind of a microcosm of what happens when you realize that someone, essentially with power, it's that same kind of game, right? Where you use appearances, you kind of play with appearances and make things seem a certain way. Well, but under the surface, you're really the guy pulling the strings and things like that. So when you reveal things like that, and people see the lengths that you're going to do something, or to control how perceptions look, it kind of takes the magic away too. And I feel like that all that ties in to this, like to this law, you know what I mean? Like, and this example specifically, when you see that everything was just reproduced and it wasn't spontaneous, it takes the magic away completely, and that's why it's anti power, I guess, right? So I guess there's always that delicate balance about making things seem a certain way, but not letting people know that the lengths you're taking to get that done, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think that's the whole point, is you're concealing your intentions, essentially.
Yeah. And there's so many laws that's essentially that. essentially concealing your intentions in a way,
Yeah.
because that's what we're doing here with this law specifically.
Like there was about Rikuyu, there was one instance where there was a lot of snow coming down.
Yep.
And he was having somebody important come over, and so he quickly ran out and he took like cushions, I guess, and he covered the stepping stones that led to his house.
Yeah.
And then before this really important guy came, the snow stopped, and Rikuyu ran back outside and removed the cushions, and this basically allowed the front of his house to have this beautiful blanket of snow, but the stepping stones were uncovered, so it was like these stepping stones were leading right through this like delicate pile or shimmer of snow basically to the house.
There was essentially a pathway to his house.
Yeah. Now, if this important guy had seen Rikuyu running back into the house with these cushions, this guy. But he, planned well ahead of the arrival of this, person he was trying to impress.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I guess it made an impact on this individual because obviously we know the story.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's definitely the main thing for this law.
Reversal time?
I say we go right on to the reversal. A couple points with the reversal. First off, Green talks about how, the secrecy around the actions that you make, the actions that you take should kind of always have a veil of kind of lightheartedness and kind of playfulness, I guess, in a certain way. You don't necessarily want to be seen as someone who aggressively, I guess, hides kind of what you're doing and hides how effortless your work is. I think the main reason for that is because then people might be suspicious or people might kind of, they might kind of see how hard you're working to conceal that, right? But he also does say that there are certain instances where the audience might actually be beneficial to reveal some information depending on the audience and depending on the kind of people and things like that you're, I guess, performing in front of in a certain way.
Yeah, you just don't want to reveal all your tricks.
Yeah,
revealing some of them's fine.
Yeah, so you want to be kind of measured about it too. You want to carefully plan the secrets you reveal, and you don't want to give them the whole picture. If it's something that you if you want to be careful about what it is that you do reveal, because people could take advantage of that. I do have an example with this, personal example. I was really good friends with not really good friends. We were pretty good friends with. I was pretty good friends with a magician, local magician, Virginia area. Great guy, funny guy, all that stuff. And I remember, like, we got close enough where I was like, dude, seriously, what are some of your secrets? Like, you know what I mean? How do you do some of these things and stuff? And I remember he never told. I think he told me one hack. Like, he told me a secret that you could find online about, like, dealing cards or something. I don't remember what it was, but I remember every time I asked him a question. I asked him all the time, but every time I asked him a question, it was always playful. Right? He always had a little joke with it. Like, oh, Rudy, if I tell you I have to kill you, ha ha ha, things like that.
Yeah.
And and I think you kind of have to, and so when he would do that, then I would stop bugging him. I'd be like, all right, whatever, and I did honestly kind of gain some respect when he would do that, and I mean, it fits well with the reversal, because when he did give me some secret, it was just like a little card trick, or like a little thing that he does when he shuffles cards, or I don't know.
But it was probably like you saw and you're like, oh, this guy's a genius.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then you realize.
Dude, I buttered his bread like crazy. I was like, dude, how do you do that? You know what I mean? Like, I was like the way, I don't know if you saw the video of like David Blaine and like Shaq and like LeBron James and all that.
I've seen David Blaine, several of his videos, not that one in particular though.
There's one video where it's a bunch of basketball players, and he does like this little card trick, and like LeBron is just running all over the place, like, oh my god. That's how I reacted to every every simple thing he did. It really seemed like it seemed occultish the way he was doing it. It was ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, that's I still hold him to a high regard because he does really work hard and puts all those things together.
Yeah, of course.
Are very like they work night and day.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was how it was reflected in my real life.
Absolutely. Yeah. But and the thing is, like, he showed you enough to get you to think that he was a genius, but at the same time, later on you realize, wait a minute, this is like online. If I had just done a Google search, I would have found this
out.
Yeah.
So he tempered it. He definitely didn't give me his best.
Yeah.
His best stuff.
Exactly.
So,
well, I think that's it, my friend.
All right, for the 48 Laws of Power podcast, my name's Rudy Malumba.
And I'm John Karp.
Signing off. Well, that was our take. What do you think? Email us at the 48 Laws of Power podcast at gmail.com.
Be sure to check us out on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and like us on Facebook.
Listen in every Monday as we air new episodes.